Not looking at the camera.
No, look at me, look at me.
Okay.
So Rita, today is October 9th,
Yes.
2018.
Correct.
And we are with Rita. How do you say the last name?
Sinder, Sinder.
And what is your maiden name?
Meisler, Meisler.
And I'm going to make it clear just for the record, this interview has nothing to do with Palestine 1947-48, War of Independence. We're actually interviewing Rita because she's never talked on record about her experiences on the kinder transports, and we are going now to talk about her story. And we both felt, especially I felt, that it needs to be in our archive, documented, so that the story will always be somewhere. And of course, in a few months, we will be sending you a copy of this interview that we're doing, unedited. We don't edit anything. So tell me where and when you were born, and what kind of...
Oh dear! Now that if I have to tell you how when I was born, you'll figure out how old I am. July 18th, 1928.
July
18th, 1928.
And you're born in Vienna, Austria?
Vienna, Austria, and life was gemütlich, lovely, very laid back. Very sweet childhood.
Do you have siblings?
I have, my sister's older. She was the favorite of my parents because the oldest always is. That's the way families, Jewish families anyway, are, that the firstborn is always the most favorite.
Okay.
Life, as I said, was sweet.
What did your parents do?
My parents came originally from Poland.
Mm-hmm.
My dad from Churawice and my mother from Podhaice. They met in Vienna and they married in 1925. My sister was born 9 months later after they were married, and I was born in 1928.
1928.
I went to school around the corner of where we lived on Hollandstrasse 8, door 21 on the 3rd floor, no elevator. The toilet was in the hallway, and my sister and I shared a very tiny room with 2 beds and a table and chairs. We called it the Kabinettel, and we had a housekeeper by the name of Mitzi. Mitzi slept in the kitchen. And my dad would come home at 10 o'clock at night, and he would wake up Mitzi, and she would make him a warm supper. That was life. It was very hard life for help in those days, and she was happy to have a job. She was wonderful to me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Wonderful, because my mother was working with my dad. They had a factory manufacturing pajamas and nightgowns.
They were in the garment business.
And the garment business. Originally, my dad started out selling cigarettes, one at a time. He met my mother. She graduated in Vienna High School, and she became a bookkeeper in a retail store. And he was selling merchandise at the time. He met her. He asked her out. The next is history. They married.
Then, so what kind of household are you brought up in? Like, is it like
everything?
Is it like totally assimilated?
Polish Orthodox.
Polish Orthodox. You guys keep the Sabbath.
Absolutely, we had a kosher home, and
so was Mitzi Jewish?
No,
but
Mitzi
she knew
was
about kosher too.
Well, my mother taught her how to keep the milchig and fleischig apart and to be careful of it, and the Polish temple was about, I would say, within walking distance of about 4 or 5 blocks, 6 blocks. 6 blocks.
And your school was around the corner too?
My school was around the corner on Kleine Sperlgasse, and all the kids, although it was a public school, every kid was Jewish because it was the second district, the Jewish district.
Second district in Vienna.
Zweiten Bezirk, the second district.
Okay.
As I said, life was sweet. Mitzi sometimes took me to church.
Mm-hmm.
My sister wouldn't go with her, but I loved her. I went with her. I knew she couldn't leave me alone at home.
Yeah.
And I would hear the priest talking about the dirty Jew. And I didn't understand it because our home was spotless and clean sheets every week and clean white tablecloths. So I didn't understand that part. I had never heard the word anti-Semitism until 1936. In 1936, the Nazis assassinated the chancellor at the time. His name was Dollfuss.
Yes.
I don't remember his first name.
He was an anti-Nazi.
No, anti-Nazi.
He was anti.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
They assassinated him, and the Nazis put in Schuschnigg, who was a puppet for the Nazis. I remember that we were on vacation someplace, and I saw fires in the distance because that, in other words, the Nazis started to burn various areas. And suddenly we became afraid. And I had never heard the word anti-Semitism before, and it came up at that time. It was a strange word. Yeah. Strange word, anti-Semitism.
And it kept on coming again and again.
Yes.
And you're trying to understand what does this mean?
What is it meaning? So this was 1936. I was, 8 years old. Then Hitler invaded Austria, the Anschluss, and the people were cheering.
Do you remember that? Do you remember seeing that?
Yes, because Mitzi went to the ring of seeing Hitler. And there was a big round street, there still is, the ring, the most important street in Vienna, and it's a circle, and with most important buildings, and it's very wide. And Hitler marched in a motorcade through that area, and Mitzi asked for the day off, and she went, she came home, she was ecstatic. The Austrians, everybody talked about it. Hitler came in, we have an Anschluss. They were so happy. And all of a sudden things happened. All of a sudden things happened. And then about there was Kristallnacht, which was...
Kristallnacht was after.
It was 6 months later, I think. November.
Excuse me, it was November 38. This is March 38. So 6 months after, exactly. 6
months later. And they had the Kristallnacht where they broke all the windows of the stores of people that we knew on Taberstrasse, and we saw all the cracked glass on the floor. Saturday of that year, my dad went to the Polish temple, the usual morning services, and the men were downstairs. The women were upstairs. I used to go upstairs with my mother, sometimes sneak down to see my dad downstairs. And he went to services, and then he came home, and we had a big meal, the usual custom of having a Shabbat big meal, lunch. Yeah. And my sister went over to her friend Erna Chaimowitz, so she was not home. And my dad did the usual. After a big lunch, you take a nap. He put on his pajamas, and he crawled into bed to take a nap. And my mother would help around with Mitzi to clean up or whatever. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was November, it was already snowing, and was already getting dark at 3 o'clock, and a forceful knock on the door, like loud banging and shaking of the door. And my mother looked through the peephole, and she saw 3 SS with black uniforms, black boots, and clubs in their hands, pounding the door. And the housekeeper, Mrs. Blaustein, was not Jewish. She was with them. My mother wouldn't open the door.
Who was with the...
The housekeeper or the concierge? Resident manager. Right, okay. The resident manager, Mrs. Blaustein, was with them. And finally, she said to my mother, Mrs. Meisler, I beg you, open the door. They're breaking the door. First, they tore down the mezuzah, and then they said, they're breaking down the door anyway. You better open the door. My mother opened the door. In the meantime, my dad had heard all this noise. He came out in pajamas, no house shoes, and bare feet, and he came out to see what's going on. The three SS dragged my dad. They got a hold of him, and they dragged him down the 3 flights of steps, and his feet were not on the ground, in his pajamas, and dragged him out. And we didn't know what. My mother was screaming, screaming, screaming. My sister wasn't home. Mrs. Blaustein started to shake my mother, and she said to her, Mrs. Meisler, help me get a coat and warm clothes for him. So she made my mother go to the back bedroom and get a coat and a scarf and a hat and shoes. And anyway, she gave it to Mrs. Blaustein, who was a very righteous Christian. And Mrs. Blaustein ran after the SS and begged them if she could give the warm clothes to my dad. And they let her because she was Christian. She wasn't a Jew. And what happened was, my dad disappeared for 5 days. We thought he was dead.
And you saw this?
I saw this. I saw this. And we thought he was dead. My sister didn't see it, so she never had that trauma.
She never had the image of
seeing him being dragged down in pajamas by 3 guys with black boots and the hat and the uniform and the clubs hitting him. Anyway, 5 days later, we get a phone call from the pharmacy, because nobody had a phone in those days. Pharmacy had a phone. My dad was able to call, and he was now in Poland, and he called my mother to come to the phone at the pharmacy, and he said to her that she had to be strong. She had to get the children out in whatever way she possibly could. She was to do everything to get the children out, at least the children. They listened. Then he started writing her letters, and the Nazis, of course, opened up the letters, and they called my mother in. My mother looked like a Swedish, green-eyed, white skin, gorgeous woman, really beautiful woman, but she didn't look Jewish, and very beautiful. And the Nazis called her in.
Just keep eye contact.
Okay, and the head man told her she had 3 weeks to get out because she was also a Polish citizen. She's not allowed to stay in Vienna. If you moved even till today, you move into Vienna, if you're not born there, you are never a citizen. Unless you're born there, you're not a citizen.
So they basically came for your father.
They came for my father, but here's the story. Here's the story that we found out from my dad. Hitler wanted to invade Poland, so he wanted to create a situation. He picked up all the Poles from Germany and Austria, and he knew where they were. I mean, that was easy. He picked them up, and he shipped them on trains to the border of Poland where he was going to invade. And he figured out he has the Jews in the trains. If the Poles shoot from that side, the German army is behind the train, behind the Jews, and then can come around in between the trains and shoot at the Poles and get over and invade Poland. So here was the train, and it stood in front of the Polish. There was a no man's land for at least 50 yards. And the soldiers, this time it was not Nazis, but soldiers that were guarding the train.
Wehrmacht.
Wehrmacht. And he said that they goose-stepped to the right, turned around at the end of the train, and this way. He figured out that when they turned around opposite of how long it will take him to run across no man's land, jump over the 6-foot fence, and stand there as if he's an onlooker. And that's what he did. And he stood there. He always felt he was one of very few that survived the train, because they were squished between Hitler invading Poland, and he doesn't think any of the rest on the trains were able to stay alive. He went to see he had at the time 7 siblings still in Poland, brothers and sisters, all older, because he was one of, I think, the youngest. And he found them. He also had been selling merchandise to people who had stores in Poland.
So he had a
And he
few
went
contacts.
there to get help. My mother, after she was called by the Gestapo to come in and told 3 weeks, she begged them to have 6 weeks to get the children out. She signed me up on the Kinder transport, and my sister couldn't go because she was already 12. I was not yet 10 when she signed me up. They did not take children over
This is
10.
1938.
1938, but I didn't go until 39. In the meantime, my grandfather passed away, and my mother ran for the doctor, and the doctor came, and he was very upset. He said the Nazis had taken away his license. He was not allowed to prescribe nitroglycerin, and because no pharmacy would accept a prescription from a Jewish doctor, and he couldn't save him. So I saw my grandfather's dead body, and we buried him, first time that I ever was in a cemetery. And I remember saying, he's in a box, he can't breathe, take him out. It was a tough time. Anyway, there was no food in the house. Then we heard that the American Jews were sending matzahs over and some other food, and we should go to the local market to pick it up. And we went there, all they had was dry matzah, and I remember I thought, I couldn't eat it. I was choking in my throat. And we hadn't had eggs or milk or bread or cheese or meat. Meat, impossible. We had pretty much potatoes. And look at me now. Look at me now. Anyway, my mother turned the parlor into a bedroom for my grandparents. I had forgotten that. My mother sold the factory. She sold the car. Then, about 6 months after...
And this whole time your father's in Poland?
He was in Poland.
Do you guys have any contact with him?
Yes, he would write, and we would get letters. But we saw that they were opened.
Yeah.
They opened every letter and they read it. So we were very careful of what we said. And then all of a sudden, another knock on the door, and this time the Nazis came, but they were not in uniform. And they had coats on and hats and suits. And my mother recognized one of them as being the attorney for their factory. He came to our house looking for valuables, jewelry, that the Jews were hiding. When they left, they put a fire on in both fireplaces. We used to have in the parlor and in the bedroom these stand-up fire heaters, that went through the ceiling, and with a little metal door, iron door, and you would stuff it with paper and wood, and it would burn.
Sure.
So they would light the fire before they left. And I thought, strange, very strange. Later on, I learned why. Many Jews hid their jewelry and valuables in the fireplace, and the Nazis learned about it. So they figured if we light the fire either the Jews will tell us that they have valuables in there, or the Jew will see his and her valuables go up in smoke. My mother had a better place. I'm going to share it with you. Any of you have been to Europe where you have the high toilet tanks hanging way up on the top? Mm-hmm. She had a waterproof pouch. She put all the stuff in there, and she climbed up on top on the tank, and she stuffed it in there. That was her hiding place. So it was much better.
So these people come into your house. One of them is an ex-employee of your parents. He's the
well,
lawyer.
I wouldn't. He's a lawyer.
He's the lawyer who represented them.
Yes.
Who knows them?
Yes.
He probably told
He
the
did
Nazis,
it on purpose, yes, because he told them that he had been our lawyer, my parents' lawyer, and that's why they came. Absolutely.
And they come to the house. Are they like throwing things around? Or are they like?
Oh, they opened up every drawer. They looked into it. They lifted up the mattresses and looked underneath.
I'm trying to just for a minute just kind of like stop and think about how much trauma to a 10-year-old girl in this 6-month period. I mean,
a lot.
How much like
a lot
from like having a normal life to like one day that door knock and your father being dragged out and your grandfather dying and having no food and these guys, and it's insane.
Not only that, my Oma and I walked over to the Polish synagogue, and we saw the burned up pews and chairs outside and buildings that were burnt down around it. There was another synagogue where my Aunt Jenny got married in the first Bezirk, first district. They didn't touch that one. Till today, it's a beautiful, beautiful synagogue with blue and gold stars in the ceiling and velvet seats. They didn't touch it because all the neighbors were owned by Gentile. It was a Gentile neighborhood. And they were afraid that if they burned that, it'll catch on the other buildings. So that one they never touched. But today, if you go to Vienna, you want to find that little temple, that shul, pretty tough to find it. No signs. No signs. But so, but today what's interesting, we were there about 11 years ago. They have Israeli police with guns inside and outside.
The synagogue?
It's the Israelis are protecting it. Actual Israelis, yes, are protecting that little synagogue. Yeah. Not little. I think you could seat probably at least 150 to 200 people in there. And the women were, again, upstairs, the men downstairs.
I want to get back to Vienna now. So your mother has her jewels hidden.
Yes.
Is it jewels? Is it cash? Is it like gold?
Everything. Yes.
She's got it hidden.
Yeah.
They didn't find it.
No.
What happens after that?
Okay. I go on a I'm accepted on the Kindertransport, and
now, do you even know what this is at the time?
Absolutely. You grow up fast.
Right. Do you understand that you're going to be saying goodbye to your mother and sister?
And my mother takes me over the bridge, the Salzburger Bridge, and she said, "Rita, look at Vienna. It is so beautiful. You may never see it again." And I remember saying, "Ich spuck auf Wien. I spit on it. I never want to see it again." I saw it again twice. I still can't stand the Viennese. They're still Nazis. They're still anti-Semites. They're worse than the Germans. Anyway, I went.
What's the date of your Kindertransport?
Oh, boy.
Do you remember?
It had to have been like May or June of 39. Yeah.
So the war has already started.
No.
No, it hasn't.
No.
No.
I was in England.
Sorry, my mistake.
Yeah,
my mistake.
I was on the transport.
So the transport leaves from Vienna?
It leaves from Vienna through Holland. We went to Holland, and then
How many kids are on the transport with you?
A few hundred.
A few hundred?
Yes, a few
Now,
hundred
Who
kids.
do you guys pay? Did you ever find that out who your mother paid?
She didn't pay anything
No,
for
she-
that.
No.
No.
It was just get them out of here.
Right. She didn't
Okay.
pay anything. She just signed me up. And I remember being in the highest building in Vienna. There was an apartment building, and we had to walk up the steps. And I remember each step we had to wait 15 minutes. I think we were there 4 hours
Just
before I got up to the top to be able to sign up.
Okay. So you go to Holland.
We went to Holland and then went on a ship.
England.
And it was very stormy, and everybody threw up except me. I love water. Water and I, we get along. And we got off the ship the next morning, and we were waiting for buses to pick us up to drive us to London. And we saw kids outside playing in a school, and they were talking to us, and I didn't understand a word they were saying, not one word. Mouth was moving, and I thought, strange, I'm not understanding one word. A wonderful couple took me in, Hilda and Phil Bendele. They had been married 10 years. They were also Orthodox, but modern, very modern Orthodox.
This is in London?
In London. She spoke Yiddish, he did not. So we communicated because they had a male dog, and I loved that dog. It was I guess a white poodle or something, but a standard one, wasn't little. And I know they even took me on vacation. It was so strange for me to go back on the channel on the boat from England to Belgium for vacation. It was before the war. With them, they took me on vacation, and we were in the sand and in the ocean. I'd never been in the ocean before. I'd never seen sand before. And then we went back to London. And then all of a sudden, we had, in every square, we had those balloons, the big balloons that England's put up.
Zeppelins.
Well, I guess you would call it a Zeppelin. They knew that Hitler was going to bomb London. So it was immediately blackout, and immediately they put up these huge balloons to go up in the sky, and they thought maybe when the planes come, and if they go low enough, they'll hit those balloons. They were with helium, and the plane would explode. It was not a very good idea, and I don't believe one plane from Hitler's planes ever got hit by that. The kids, all of them, were evacuated.
From England, from London.
Out of London. Every child
So
got
now you're evacuated again.
Now I'm evacuated, and I am with 6 other people, 6 other children that come from Germany. And only my one friend from Vienna, the one that I had been friends with, and she was in the same apartment building, Nori Sobel. We were at the King Henry VIII estate. Beautiful estate. It was lonely. It was a tough time. It was a very lonely time. And I'm trying to learn English. And when we go to the school, the English kids don't understand that we are really with them. They think we're Germans, and they spit on us because they don't understand who are these kids that speak only German. Anyway, Hilda and Phil, the war broke out. Phil was already 42, and they were ready to call him in the army. He didn't want to be called. They emigrated to the United States. I'm now staying with Hilda's mother and father.
They immigrated to the United States during the war?
During the war.
Yeah.
Yeah, war had already broken out.
So who are your foster parents now?
well, I wouldn't call them foster parents. I lived for about 3 months with Hilda's parents, elderly parents, and her 2 younger sisters who were not yet married. And I shared a bed with one of them. And they were very good to me. My papers came through afterwards. In the meantime, it's a long story. My dad and mother were in Poland together. They were in.
What happened with your mother?
My mother finally. My
sister. What happened?
My sister had got an affidavit from Martin Gang in Los Angeles. He was a attorney for Olivia de Havilland, Joan Fontaine, Louis B. Mayer, and he had. We even have a letter. My niece has it. In which he wrote to my mother, why do you want to send your child alone to the United States? The Germans, I studied at Heidelberg, and the Germans were wonderful to me. We still have that letter.
Who wrote this letter?
Martin Gang.
To who? To your mom?
To my mother in Vienna. Nobody in the United States had an inkling of what is going on over there. Nobody. And at any rate, make a long story short.
What happens with your sister?
My sister comes to the United States and she stays with Martin Gang. And she went there a couple months after I left for London.
Okay.
Can you imagine my mother's strength to give up 2 children and send them away? And I think about it, could I have done it? One not quite 10 and the other one 12. Could I have sent my children away from me? But she understood she wanted the children to survive.
What happens to your mother after she sends your sister?
Okay, my mother has to go back to Poland because she was ordered by the Nazis
To get out.
to go back to Poland. She's now with my dad. It is at that time that Hitler starts bombing Warsaw and Lodz in Poland. And they are both in Lodz and in Warsaw. So they went through the bombing both times. My mother, then they find out, they get a letter, that their affidavit from Martin Gang is waiting for them in Vienna. They are now in Poland. They have to be able to go through from Poland, through Germany, and then to Austria. My mother, being the beauty, befriended.
Wait a second, but your sister's already in L.A.
In L.A.
So,
I am in London.
but what does she need an affidavit
My parents,
For
for
them
my parents.
to go to L.A.?
Yes, my parents now, Martin Gang, after my sister got here, my sister explained things, he sent the affidavit for my parents.
So they have to go get it.
So now they have to come from Poland to Vienna to pick it up. My mother befriended a lonely German soldier, made dinner for him, and she got him to buy the train tickets because the Jews could not buy train tickets. He bought the train tickets for them. So they took the train through Poland, through Germany, back into Vienna, Austria. And this time they stayed with my grandmother, who now was sleeping in the tiny little bedroom my sister and I had, and the rest of the apartment was filled with loads of other people. They got the affidavit, and Martin Gang wouldn't give it for my grandmother. She was already 62 years old. And he had in the affidavit, what people don't understand is what the affidavit in those days meant. The affidavit meant that Martin Gang gave a guarantee to the American government that my parents and my sister and I would never become a financial burden to the United States government, meaning they would never have to give us any money, any food stamps or anything, that he would support us completely. And he took that on, not knowing how long my dad would, how soon my dad would be able to stand on his own feet. He wouldn't do it for my grandmother. She was already 62 years old. and he knew that he would end up with that burden. My dad didn't have the money to be able to give the affidavit when he finally came to the United States. And we found a letter from her only recently.
From who?
From my mama to my parents.
Your grandma?
Yeah. And in which she begged them, I'm begging you, get me out. I'm begging you, get me out. My dad couldn't afford it yet. My mother was working. She was making $12 a week. My dad was making $15 a week. They couldn't afford to give her the affidavit. 11 years ago, Jack and I went to Vienna. My niece, Linda Mills, who is a professor of law at NYU, did a documentary on my sister mainly. It was mainly about my sister, not me. But at any rate, we were there with her when she did research, and we went to the archives and we found my mama's name. The Nazis kept superb records, and we found the name and found out when she was picked up, when she was put on the train, when she was taken to Poland. And she was taken to Treblinka. She was shot and shoveled into the ground. And they have all that written down. They have it all written down. Anyway, came to the United States. I'm very fortunate. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Within 2 years, my dad paid Martin Gang back every penny. He opened up a blouse factory. My mother, my sister, and I, we all worked at it. And we started going to Federation dinners. My dad said, you got it good, you give back. That's been our motto, Jack's and mine. I kind of like stopped thinking about what happened to me. Didn't want to bring it up. My parents did not allow German to be spoken in the house. We had to learn English fast. I mean, here we are, the four of us. First of all, my mother had a nervous breakdown at the beginning, and then one time we went to see Mrs. Minerva, and she had to go out because of the bombing, and she couldn't take, because she had remembered the bombing in Warsaw and in Lodz. And we never talked about anything of Europe ever again. My dad brought in his, my mother's sister, Jenny and Frank, who were originally, his father was in the Austrian army. He didn't think he was a Jew. He found out with Hitler that he was a Jew anyway. And they went to Shanghai, China, and my dad brought them over. Another brother of my mother's, the youngest, went to, at that time, Palestine, and my dad brought him and his family from Israel to the United States. My dad became a very comfortable entrepreneur. When I married Jack, Jack is a mechanical engineer. My dad invested with Jack, and Jack built buildings. I don't think about my past. I don't want to. As I'm getting older, though, the brain is bad. It doesn't suppress the memories of the childhood, which I was able to do before. And also, I never felt that I should talk because my friends had been in camps. Sure. They had terrible experiences. Sure. Mine, I survived. My parents survived with me.
But just because you're fortunate doesn't mean you're guilty. of not going through hell. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I hear you, but I never felt that that's one of the reasons I never went to the Spielberg
Sure.
Museum to speak, because
Sure.
I felt I don't have anything to say. Mine is a wonderful outcome. Today, you were recommended to us through APAC, because we're very involved.
Mm-hmm.
Chair, we give back, okay? We give back. As I said today, in those days we had one toilet in the hall. Don't ask me how many toilets I have in the house now. Okay, I mean, it's crazy, all right?
Mm-hmm.
From one extreme to the other.
Mm-hmm.
But you give back. You have to give back.
I want to talk to you. Yes, that's absolutely that's absolutely true. When do you finally reunite with your parents?
I was in England a year and a half. So when you hear like a southern accent, it's a combination of German, British English, and American English. And I never got rid of it. I don't know why. But people ask me, are you from New York? No. Are you from the South? No. And then if I tell them I'm from Vienna, Austria, it becomes a whole hullabaloo. So usually I'll just leave it, you know.
When do you finally reunite with your parents?
It had to have been in the spring of 1941, because 6 months later, the Japanese... Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, so you were here when Pearl Harbor, yeah.
I was here. We were glued to the
Sure.
radio. And then right afterwards, all the windows had to be blacked out. There was no light.
Sure.
Yes, we knew that the Japanese were being picked up, and we were very afraid of U-boats and being attacked, being bombed by the Japanese. Terribly afraid. We were so unprepared. The United States was so unprepared.
Oh, for sure. Tell me about this lawyer who helped you guys.
Martin Gang. Anyway, we still have the paper. He had to prove how much money he was making in those days, and he made in
Was
those.
he Jewish?
Oh yes, my mother's cousin, Martin Gang. Absolutely.
Oh, he's your mother's cousin. I didn't understand that.
Yeah, my mother's cousin. Yeah.
And he was a big shot attorney here.
Very big shot. He ended up defending for free during the McCarthy era. He defended the writers and the people that were being accused of being communists by McCarthy. He was at one time.
Hold on. Okay.
At one time, he was the chair of Federation for a long time. He ended up being a wonderful, very good human being. One story I didn't tell you. I came to the United States, like May, June 1941, and my parents, on a Sunday, went over to Martin Gang and his wife, Josephine. They wanted to introduce me. They have their 2 children together.
Yeah.
And so they're bringing me over to them. And my mother started talking. And Josephine went up to my mother and said to her, Ava, shut up. You're crazy, and everybody knows you're crazy. Just shut up. My mother shut up, and we all shut up from then on. And years later, I had friends. I didn't talk about my background to my friends. Jack knew. He's my best friend. But other than that, I didn't share anything, because they would tell me, we had the Depression in the United States. We suffered so. I thought to myself, you suffered so. Why didn't you know? There's a little something in me. There's an anger in me. and it's coming up now. Why didn't the Jews of America know? There were 50 rabbis that went to see Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the treasurer, the Department of Treasury, Morgenthau, told Roosevelt, leave the back door, through the back door and don't see them. Okay, the 50 rabbis were not seen and not heard. But why didn't they organize their congregations and to stand in front of Capitol Hill and make a loud noise? Everything was, shush still. If you don't make noise, maybe they won't know I'm Jewish. So, okay, who am I today? I'm a very proud Jew. I'm very proud of my faith. I'm very proud of my heritage. I think that the Jewish people have something worthwhile to give to the rest of the world. But I also will tell you of what I told I'm on the board at Valley B'Shalom Temple. And I told them, this September 26th, I read them my notes, and I ended up with this. I did tell them my story, because again, I had not talking about my life to people. And I said to them, I'm a proud Jew, but I want to give advice. Take care of your own first. Take care of your Jewish people first. Take care of the Jews all over the world, because there's a lot of anti-Semitism that's creeping up. Take care of Israel. Take care of your Jewish brethren. And only then do Tikkun Olam for the rest of the world. And I ended it up with Hineni. Here I am. I am here.
Yes, you are. Just like that metaphor that you gave of the bathroom. I think that
Oh, I have a fun story to tell you, too. How do we bring the jewelry out of Vienna? On the kinder transport, my mother was afraid to put anything on Anne or me to take with us. So there was an Orthodox family that was leaving for London right before I left on the kinder transport. And she begged them to take a feather bed, a camera, 2 pairs of silver candlesticks, one that belonged to my grandmother, one that belonged to her. And what did she do? She took the jewelry, she made a little pouch, she stuffed it inside the feather bed, the duchen, and she gave it to them to take to the to London. And then she said, my daughter Rita will come and pick it all up. Okay, we call them. We say we'd like to pick everything up. Oh, the typewriter is broken. The camera is broken. And they were sleeping with a duchent. Okay? What do you want the feather bed for? Well, I explained it to Aunt Hilda. So we took a taxi. It was about an hour away from the other side of London. We were in N16, and the other one was way out, the other area. And we picked up the feather bed. They had the 2 sets of candlesticks left for me, which was very nice. We brought home the feather bed, took it in the kitchen, and Aunt Hilda started to cut it, to fish into the feather bed, the duck's feathers or the goose feathers or whatever, chicken feathers, to find the pouch. We couldn't find the pouch. And the feathers are all over the place, all over the kitchen. It was the first time I learned English swear words. I didn't know them before, but I knew them then. And we finally found the pouch. And Hilda was very bright also, very cunning. In those days, little girls wore garter belts with little thing hooking on the stockings. Mm-hmm. On the inside of the garter belt, on each place, all the way on the inside, she stitched each piece of jewelry. I did bring the candlesticks with me when I went on the boat to the United States. But I had all the jewelry in the garter belt. When I came to the United States, my dad sold the jewelry, and he bought sewing machines and a cutting table, and he started making blouses. And that's what it was. I guess in life you have to be cunning and conniving too to be able to survive. Because in the end it is the survival of the fittest. And I want to add, since you are from Israel, the survival of Israel is extremely important to Jack and Rita Sinder. Very important. And we are proud when we come there and we see the high-rises of what we remember the first time we went, 1967. And in Tel Aviv, the airport was only sand. There was no airport. And look at it now. Oh my gosh, what Israel has accomplished. I always felt we should proselytize, because that's the one thing Jews don't do. You don't proselytize. But I think we have something very wonderful to give to the rest of the world, and it's very powerful. And like I said, I'm a proud Jew.
Thank you, Rita. What is that you have next to you?
That was what I read to the board. I'll give it to you. You can keep it.
I'd like you to read it to me if you can.
But it's really the same thing as what we talked about.
Good.
And I think we would be going over the same thing.
That's fine.
If you want to take it with you, no, it's
fine.
pretty much the same.
That's fine. The fact that your parents, I'm listening to this story that you just told me, and I'm doing it play by play. I wasn't expecting you ever to see your father again after that.
No.
And not only the courage of your mother to send 2 kids off, but the courage of your mother to go to Poland, find your father, go back, she must have been a very
amazing, and yet it was my dad that was the strong one, emotionally, but she came through when she had to. It's very amazing that she was strong at the time when she had to be. Yeah. My dad was a brilliant man who had studied Talmud, very strong, mm-hmm. very agile. Mm-hmm. And brilliant man. He was a tough cookie. He was a tough dad to and my sister and me. We had to go to college. We had to learn business administration, Spanish. He was always afraid we wouldn't have a living, that there won't be a guy around to take care of us. I married Jack. My sister married the doctor. We were well taken care of. But we still had to learn
to stand on your own feet.
Stand on our own 2 feet.
Sure, absolutely.
He was very afraid.
And it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, or if you're a male or a female. Each person needs to know how to stand on his feet by himself. It's essential.
Yeah.
It's essential. And then once you stand on your feet by yourself,
you have pride in yourself.
You can lift 1 foot up and still stand, then you're good.
Well, lately not so good anymore.
I'm using a metaphor.
Okay.
But Rita, thank you so much. Really, I mean.
Josh, thank you for interviewing me. I may send the interview finally to the Spielberg.
Whatever you
What are they?
You're going to get a copy of this in a few months. We're going to
Okay.
Right now. I'm going to sit with you, Jack and you both have to sign release forms.
Okay.
And then on the back, you're going to fill in the address and everything. And then when I get back to Israel, it's going to take the archive a little bit of time to process everything because I have another 60 interviews. But we will be sending here both interviews.
So this is still going while you're talking?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll stop the book
Okay.
right now. Now,